and people used them. They were very common in people's pockets, and the half dollar was the workhorse of the American economy. So when you think back about half dollars were used, and they were really, they were like a dollar bill. They were really common to find in people's pockets, and they were very commonly spent. Now you couple that with the fact that after any big war, but particularly after World War One, there was a recession. And in the recession comes a low mintage of coins and a real circulation of the very, scarce coin that is out there. So if you look at the very first years of the Walking Liberty Half, if you look at from 1916 to about 1922 or 3, you will find it very difficult to find MS, high-end specimens. And it is mostly because the coins were used for what they were intended.
Mm-hmm. It sounds like you've done your research.
Yeah.
Well, I mean, you're
Sure.
talking about something that I really like, and it is a history that I'm really familiar with. You talk 20th
Yeah.
century history, now you're in my wheelhouse.
Well, and I think it's the coin is rather interesting because it's just the sheer amount of them that we actually still see walking into the coin store every day. I mean, if a day does not go by, and if we don't buy a Walking Liberty half dollar through the door in the coin shop, no matter what grade, something is wrong every day.
Yeah,
So
that's very true. I mean, they come in all the time. And I think for some collectors, I mean, this is probably true for me actually. They're kind of the gateway drug to the hobby. I mean, because they're one of the, like you go to your local coin shop and you dig in the 90% silver bucket for the first time, and you pull out a nice, I don't know, find a very fine Walking Liberty, and you think, man, this coin is cool looking. We talked about design. It's old and it's affordable, and so I think that's how a lot of people get started that way. It's a good beginner coin, and I mean at the same time you can go crazy with it too and spend $75,000 trying to put together a full uncirculated set. But there's a lot of room in between there too.
yeah,
Well, and there's a lot of reasons to collect them. If you talk about an early 20th century or 18th century half dollar, you're talking about something that's 90% silver. So there is a substantial amount of value in these coins. I mean, the melt on them is what now, Matt? I mean, you're talking roughly what, eight times melt,
no, I mean,
8 times face. I mean,
right now, let's see. Let me grab a calculator real quick. Spot melt is about $5.25 on a Walking Liberty half dollar today.
okay, so almost 10
No,
times,
a
or
little more than
actually a little
10.
bit more
Yep.
than 10 times face. So that's a substantial amount of money for just a really relatively small coin. It keeps them interesting, and it gives people a reason to bother with them even if they don't like the design.
Well, and that's the thing. We get people that come in the shop looking for just junk silver, as we call it, and sometimes they end up, kind of grabbing a couple of those and saying, "Oh, those are neat." Then we turn them into collectors, and then it's all over. Then they're then they're,
And
then they're done. We got
Yeah.
them roped in. We pull them in.
I think it's really interesting that Sam referred to them as the gateway drug of collecting because when it's like a lot of us collect as kids. We collect as little kids, or we're like trying to put together a Blue Whitman folder, all that kind of stuff. And then we kind of return to the hobby typically in our 30s or sometime in our late 20s when we have more disposable income and we're really ready to kind of make an investment into the hobby. And the very first coins that I bought when I came back into the hobby in my 30s were Walking Liberty half dollars. So I think it's kind of ironic that Sam called them the gateway drug because they certainly were that for me.
I mean, they're fun to collect. I mean, it's a gorgeous design. It's a challenging set. I think it's interesting because it was actually. I want to talk about the design a little bit for a minute because I know we've kind of lauded over somewhat, but it was designed by Adolf. I'm guessing it's pronounced Weinmann because he was from Germany. Um,
Yeah.
I'm assuming. I don't want to call it Weinmann and sound, I don't know, very American, but I guess I am,
You sound
but
like anybody else on the coin show.
whatever. It's probably Weinman. I don't know exactly how it's pronounced, but just let the record show I attempted to pronounce it
Or
correctly.
wouldn't it be Adolf?
Adolf, yes, that's true.
Yeah, Adolf Weinman.
Oh, yeah,
Yeah.
that is
Yeah.
good.
Hear
Yeah,
me now and listen to me
yeah, I'll
later.
pump you up. Oh boy. Sorry, Sam. Continue.
No, it's fine. He's an interesting fellow because he actually he came to the United States at the age of 10 in 1880. He was a student of Augustus St. Gaudens, another famous coin designer and sculptor. And he was chosen by the Mint. Well, actually, the Mint looked outside of its circle for the first time, kind of to try and find some new sculptors and designers to create the coinage. And they chose his design for both the Walking Liberty and the Mercury Dime. So he, pretty important part of collecting and money history with those two designs.
And I would say two of the most beautiful designs of all time.
Yeah, absolutely. And I think part of it is the sentimentality of it too, because if you think about America at the beginning of the 20th century, it was like a new direction, right? I mean, it wasn't sort of the sedate, stoic-looking Lady Liberty of the past. The country was moving towards new technologies, new futures, more people in cities. Everything was booming, and Weinman chose basically a full figure version of Lady Liberty striding towards the dawn of a new day, clad in stars and stripes and carrying branches of laurel and oak, which was to symbolize civil and military glory. So you've got all these things kind of at the same time with what was going on in the national scene. I mean, makes for a pretty interesting coin. I mean, I think it kind of gives a lot of people the warm and fuzzies, especially when you look at one in high grade.
And yet he retained things like the Phrygian cap, which is the cap that symbolizes freedom of thought. As a matter of fact, he used that cap in both of his designs because the winged Liberty Dime has basically the exact same cap without the wings. Or I should say, the dime has the same cap with the wings.
Yeah.
The only thing is with Walking Liberties, one of the problems is, I mean, yes, they do look beautiful, but these things were tough to strike. They tried a couple different times reworking the master hub when they made them, but these things are poorly struck. I mean, that's one thing. If you get into them collecting them, they just simply could, because of the way the design was made. And I had some, people on Facebook wanting to kind of know about this. The metal did not flow very well on these, and so you had a lot of them that Lady Liberty, certain parts were not very well struck. In particular, her hand. I almost don't know why they don't designate Walking Liberties with full hands, because you see some of these where you can't even tell she has a hand at all.
Yeah.
It's just a blur.
Yeah, I actually, I kind of enjoy trying to find the worst struck walkers in high grade from time to time. I've had some really crazy coins that were really nice and uncirculated, but you couldn't even tell that there was an arm there, and it was just a big flat spot. So,
and if you look at the grading standards for this coin, everything that is struck prior to 1920, you're not allowed to, or I shouldn't say you're not allowed, but it kind of tells you that you're going to have a very hard time finding ones that have the skirt lines and the hand intact. So finding early coins of that type with really full strikes is very rare and are extremely collectible.
Yeah, you're going to pay a premium on them. I mean, you can kind of throw out the book values on those.
Now, can I ask you a question? All of your, in the Duke of Research's search through all of the Walking Liberty halves, why on earth did they produce a coin in 1916 with a mint mark on the obverse and then suddenly change it to the reverse?
That is a good question. And actually, the reason is because the mint director at the time, F.H. von Engelken, decided, as a matter of personal objection, that he did not like it. He didn't specify why, he just did not like the obverse mint mark. So, interestingly, after he left the mint in 1917, it was then that the change was ordered. So it was kind of already in the works, and even though he wasn't the mint director anymore, they decided, okay, well, I guess we'll just go with that, and we'll switch it over to the reverse. So I thought it's kind of interesting, and that came to be February 14th of 1917.
Valentine's Day.
Exactly.
See, because I think it's interesting that the Lincoln cent was the first coin that the mint mark was on the obverse of the coin, and Walking Liberty kind of tried to follow in that same footstep and had a very similar mint mark placement. And I thought it was interesting and different, but it kind of broke with all the tradition of everything that they had done up until that point. And then it's like suddenly early 1917, here they go, and then they flip flop it and put it on the back.
Strange things that they do. But and those are actually those are kind of key dates, actually, both the obverse and reverse in decent condition. And the 16, I've been told, I haven't looked at a lot of 16s, but it's supposed to have a bit more of like a pebbly surface to it, and that's because they started reworking the master die, the master hub die. So it's just kind of interesting, different surface features that you see on them. A lot of people do try and collect date sets of them, but I think one thing, and Matt, I think you'll probably agree with me, one of the most common ways they're collected is short sets.
Yep.
People love the 1940 to 1947, basically the last years of it, because they come nice and they're affordable.
Well, yeah, I was going to say, I think that's really the reason why, is because now you're talking about a coin that is readily accessible in mint state condition, and it's relatively easy to put together a set of that type and that condition. But when you get back into the earlier years, they really do get to be like, for example, 1921, that magic year when virtually every coin from branch mint is like a key date. Those coins are really valuable and really scarce and really hard to find.
I'm sorry, go ahead.
Well, I was going to say, I also think it's really interesting that Walking Liberties are one of the coins that was made during the Depression. And the Depression is kind of the last time in our history when you have coins that weren't made in certain years. One of my father's laments is that he was born in 1931. And in 1931, they didn't make dimes and they didn't make nickels, and they didn't make a bunch of coins that year. They made cents, and I think they made half dollars, and that was it.
Yeah.
So it's unusual for us to think about it in that terms, because we think of, well, they make every coin, every denomination, every single year.
Yeah, I mean, it's weird. I mean, for some reason that you didn't see certain years that they made them. I mean, out in the West, I mean, you kind of had people that liked silver a lot more, and that was true throughout U.S. history. And so, in some ways, they circulated better out there, and there were times that they just didn't need to make any. And then you also had like the Depression years. So there were some that they either didn't make them that year or they made very few of them. And the only reason that we really have any decent ones left from those years is because dealers back in the 30s realized what was happening and they saved rolls of them. So I thought that was kind of interesting, that really the only uncirculated we have left are from these astute dealers who are basically pulling them out of circulation and saving them. So if you have a nice 1921, it was probably saved by a dealer during the Great Depression. So kind of cool.
Yeah, which is kind of counterintuitive, because you think about the roll collecting craze of the 40s and 50s, and that was when everybody was saving them, and those coins are virtually worthless. Yet these coins that were saved by dealers are really very valuable and highly collectible.
Yeah. Well, I mean, coin collecting hadn't really hit its stride, I don't think, until after World War II. So that's part of the reason. And there just weren't as many people at that point interested in putting aside these coins.
And particularly in the fact that 50 cents, and think about it during the Depression, 50 cents was a lot of money.
Yeah.
And this was a time when people were strapped. They were absolutely just.
This is kind of a side point. I didn't even think about this, but I wonder if that was a time like, Matt, we see a lot of like circulated Columbian Expo halves and early, some of the early commemoratives. I wonder if that's a time when a lot of them got spent. people kind of went in their cabinets and were like, "Ah, man, I hate to do this, but I'm gonna spend this pan pack $50 I bought for $1 back in the day."
That's not a bad theory, actually. I mean,
No, I think that has a lot of merit because it was like, let's see, do I feed my kids this week?